So finally, we made it to Act 5. Act 5 is now my favorite act in the game. I don't just say that because it's the new act. I actually wasn't sure how I felt about it the first time I played through. It was a bit long and sprawling, and I prefer more of a linear-ish sort of thing with aRPGs.
Finally, the market is busy again. Almost too busy. A cart nearly rammed into my stall. Can you believe it?
And no, I can't believe it. So what I like about it is it feels to me like Act 2. You'll remember when I talked about Act 2 in that video, I said it was short, which I liked, but it was also this nice breath of fresh air in that it was not as difficult as the stuff that came before it, but the time you were done with it, your character was much, much stronger. So this is a power-up act. And once I learned to optimize the route, by the way, I got it to complete in about the same time as Act 4. It takes about an hour and a half. More if you want to grind, which I do. Then it became a lot more palatable in that regard, so I just got to benefit from all these positives. So I'm going to break this video in half. Part 1 is going to deal from Corinth to Scandia, the Golden Boar. Part 2 is going to deal with the rest. So here in Part 1, it's all about efficiency, getting through all these crazy quests in big areas in the most efficient way, and getting to Part 2. So Part 2 is where all the juicy grinding happens. It's where all my favorite monster and frequents drop. But don't worry, in Part 1 we're going to deal with some XP grinding spots. We're going to get an artifact if you don't have an artifact. I'm also going to show off what I think is the best spot for farming lupin claws. It's by far the best spot I've found, by the way. And you're going to need 3 full completed charms to complete a quest later. So by the way, to get through these guys, you have to talk to Leonidas, the mayor, and Phaedrus, all 3 of them. That'll complete a quest, and then that guy will let you through into this area. I'm not saying you can't farm Part 1 for monster and frequents. I mean, these Myrmidons drop some tridents and a couple pieces of monster and frequent armors and other things. I'm just saying that the monster and frequents I like to farm happen in Part 2, and those are the monster and frequents that I think, for the most part, people will be farming for their builds. But for now, let's talk about resists. So for the first part of Act 5, you're going to want cold resist, you're going to want physical resist, which you should have from Dionysus Wineskin. It's probably the only source you have, and that's fine. It's a bit hard to get phys res. Pierce res, which you should have from Act 4, probably in a chest piece with maybe a hag's skin or a boar's hide on it that gives a completion bonus. You're going to need poison, no problem, and you're going to need bleed. So bleed is one of those things, it rarely ever happens, but sometimes when it happens it hits really hard. So for the most part you've probably ignored it by now, it just doesn't happen frequently enough, and normal mode sort of gives a pass to bleed res. But for this act you're going to want a little bit, maybe 20%, 30%, just to stay alive against trolls and the Golden Boar. So this boss does cold and poison. You'll see that first ability he did to me was a PBA a weak cold ability. Its range is about equal to the range of throwing weapons, so you're going to want to back off when you see him telegraph, and it's a slow telegraph. He's going to summon these adds as an intermediate phase. You just kill him. I mean, he's absolutely no threat to you in this phase. And it's kind of funny because when you kill him, he takes like 30% of his health and damage. I think that's scripted. It seems to happen every time I kill him. He does this poison ability, which guess what type of damage it is? It's poison damage. You just sidestep it. It's no big deal. Once you kill him, you're free to return to town and continue on. So if you're like me by this point and you're a little bit underpowered, you'll see I'm level 33. I would actually be better off just deleting this character and recreating it with the accomplished hero function. But I'm not going to do that. I've gotten through Act 4. Act 4 is the toughest part. So if you are underpowered like me, this is the place where you're going to make up for all those weaknesses.
Well, okay.
Aha. Let me see.
So I'm not worried about my level at all. By the time I come out of Part 1, I think I'll be level 42, or maybe halfway through Part 2. Can't remember, but I'll be well into it. It's no problem at all. So if you're also missing an artifact, which is that bottom left slot, you're going to get a full completed artifact pretty quickly into this part. It's going to be random, but it's better than nothing. But anyway, once you've finished powering up your character here, of course you're free to move on to Epic Mode or Legendary Modes Act 1 and 2. But what I want to do with this character is to go back and farm a little bit in Act 4. Now when I was in Act 4 it was a little bit difficult, but when I come out of Act 5 it's going to be cake on normal mode. And what I'm looking for are a couple of Ajax relics. I really want to have some slow res before I get into Epic Mode, just because I think it's really important for attack-based characters. Now Ragnarok added a little bit more support to resist slow, and I'll show an item.
The best storage for our hero.
I'll show an item in the second part. It's easily farmable. It's in a great area, actually. It's my favorite farming area by far, the Inherior place. But again, we'll talk about that later. I keep getting ahead of myself because I want to just throw a ton of items on the screen. By the way, make sure you talk to this lady. If you don't, you can't progress to the next area. And you'll get confused. I got confused. But anyway, I'm not going to litter the screen all the time. I am going to show the monster infrequents that I think people will farm most of the time. But I'm not going to show all the legendary or epic items. I think I end up showing one, maybe two, just to support a talking point. But I think where this expansion does really well is with its itemization. I've been having a ton of fun just looking at the affixes on items and all the different things. So I don't want to spoil everything. So let's talk about the itemization. First, monster infrequents. I think monster infrequents are the most powerful items in the game. I think they're the funnest to farm. You can tailor the affixes to whatever you need. And that's mostly because, unlike Grim Dawn, you can't enchant epics or legendaries, and the enchants are actually really, really strong. So the monster infrequents in this act are huge in variety. I mean, there's full sets of monster infrequents that drop. And they drop more frequently. They drop a lot more frequently than in previous acts. So if you're targeting a specific one or a set of them, you'll be able to get them in a very reasonable amount of time. There's only one exception to that I've found so far, and that's in the Valkyrie boots. I think the Valkyrie boots, which we'll talk about in the next part, are going to be the new Stonebinder's cuffs. But what also is great about the monster infrequents is that they're going to be the most powerful versions of those items that you'll find in the game. So this is the last act in the game now, and most items have had an increased power ceiling. So if you look at the native properties of a shield, then the best you're going to get in normal mode is going to be something like 100 damage and 250 or so block shield absorb. Those are just the native base stats on an item. And Act 5 drops the weapons with the highest base damage, drops the armor with the highest base armor, and the shields with the best base shield properties. That means you're going to walk away from normal mode, ideally carrying a full set of monster infrequents from Act 5, because they'll be the most powerful. Also, the affixes in Act 5, not necessarily with the monster infrequents, but with the legendaries and epics, are insane. A lot of it is stuff we've seen before, but the numbers are just crazy. You'll see staves with different base damage types and just wacky things that really encourage thoughtful building, and they really open up a lot of build options that didn't exist before. And that in an aRPG, I think, is one of the most important things you could do. So I think the best anecdote that I can give off with all this stuff is by showing this Inherior stand shield. So you can see by looking at it that it's got an enormous amount of stats. The shield recovery, less damage, skills, and burn damage are all native to the shield. The cold damage and the cold frostburn scaling, that is the only affix that I rolled, and it's a suffix, it's of ice. So this thing doesn't even have a prefix, it could be even more powerful. And notice the requirements, this is really interesting, and you'll see this throughout Ragnarok. Level 15 is the requirement, and the required strength is 284, which is extremely low. Also notice that the shield property is 24% chance to block, 244 damage, 102 damage. That's the best type of shield you're going to get in normal mode, trust me. It's the very, very best native stats. So this thing you can inherit. I mean, build a Conqueror or any defense mastery who benefits from shield damage. This thing is going to be way overpowered, like way, way overpowered. And you can see if you can reduce the requirements, which you can with defense. You can also reduce requirements with rune mastery. Then it's just for a paltry 139 strength. So if you're looking to build an intellect character who's maybe rune mastery, you could still use this for damage. If you convert your damage with transmutation, it does affect shield damage. It won't convert damage on a skill like battle rage or battle standard or any of the shield pummel skills in the defense line, but it will convert the shield's damage, and the shield's damage is the most significant part of those damage types anyway, of those skills. So you're still free to use this offensively in an intellect build. So you're going to see a bunch of stuff like that with the monster infrequents in this act. That's all I'm saying. So here I know it's coming. It's the second boss. I'm trying to prepare for him. You need Pierce Res and Poison Res. And of course as much physical as you can muster. Now he's pretty tough for a couple reasons. One, these archers are really difficult to get rid of without aggroing him. You can't shoot up to them, which is annoying, and he himself does a slow and a ton of damage. He has, I think, the, what is it? It's in the Rogue Mastery, Calculated Strike. Every third attack does a huge amount of damage, mostly piercing. But he doesn't have Blade Honing, which is the extra pierce conversion. So I think most of his damage outside of Calculated Strike is physical. That said, pierce resistance is going to be huge against him. And of course, cap your poison. Poison's easy to cap. You're going to want to kill this guy. He is a side quest, but he's the one I think that rewards the completed artifact. And again, those things can be very powerful, and if you don't have one by this point, you're really going to want one. And even if you already have one, sometimes the bigger, better artifacts require the earlier artifacts in order to build them. They're a material, they're a requirement, just like in Grim Dawn. So you might want to keep one instance of every artifact you can somewhere in a mule, just in case you want to build one of those better artifacts later on. So I'm meandering a bit. I'm killing a lot more than you have to kill. And so that's going to impact my efficiency here. And I wouldn't recommend doing that, actually. The only reason I'm doing that is because I can't take advantage of the experience grind that I'm going to mention later on. And the reason for that is that I'm speeding up the game with an outside program. It really impacts the performance of the game. So any slight frame drops or whatever that you would normally get are heavily amplified using my settings. And the guys I recommend farming later are Spriggans, and they just destroy my computer. The Spriggans and the Wolf Riders, I can't even fight them. I'll drop to like 12 frames per second for a good 8 seconds. So I'm not going to be farming that, even though it's by far the best experience in Act 5. I can't take advantage of it while also recording under these settings. So that's why I'm killing a little bit more. By the way, these centaurs, they're just like the Act 1 centaurs. So you want to make sure you're looking for elders, you know, don't get stunned and bannered and killed. That's pretty embarrassing. So anyway, you'll see me kind of leave the path, kill more than I need to. And I'm doing that on purpose. But just know that if you follow the path at this point, that's definitely the most effective way to get through here. There's no more quests. That, what's his name? Cyron, that guy, he was the only quest in this area. And again, you can farm these guys to your heart's content. If you're a spear wielder and your spear is awful, you're due for an upgrade. These guys do drop, I think, 2 or 3 varieties of monster infrequent spears. Maybe it's just 2. I think the Ichthyans drop the other one. I think there's always a mystic chest behind this house, so it might be worth peeking behind there to pick it up. Chests in this act are more beneficial than chests in other acts, just because they have a higher chance of dropping the Act 5 epics and legendaries. Act 5 has a better chance of dropping those, by the way. And they're all very strong, like I said, so you want to go out of your way to get chests. So here we go, we're taking a boat, now we're in Gaul. And this is where we start encountering trolls. Now the first thing you'll notice about the trolls is that they do a lot of damage. Well, that damage is bleed damage for the most part. It's also pierce and physical, like always. But you can tell it's bleed damage because you'll get this sort of red aura around you. It looks kind of like little red dots. It's hard to distinguish from vitality damage, especially the vitality degen looks very similar. But whenever you see that, you know it's bleed damage. You'll get used to telling which is which.
Greetings, stranger. I'm looking after these goods until my master, the great druid Artibus, returns from the forest.
The great
Can I
druid
interest you in
Artibus.
something?
Right, so another thing I like about this act is it introduces at least 2 scrolls that I like. I think there's 5 new scrolls, but 2 of them are, I mean, I'm going to incorporate them in every build. Now, they're expensive. It's like 200,000 for a scroll on normal mode, which is 10% of what I have at this point. But one of them is called the Scroll of Sun's Blessing, I think. It does a 3,000 health heal instantly. There's no animation, it's instant. Which is probably a full heal at this point. On Epic it's 6,000, on Legendary it's 9,000. So that'll pretty much always full heal you, and it does have some other unimportant things too. But that's really a get out of jail free card. It does share cooldown with other scrolls, but it doesn't share cooldown with other potions. That means this is something you can use independent of your potion cooldown to save your life, so carrying at least one of those at a part you know is difficult coming up is definitely worth it. You can pick up one of these for next difficulties Act 4, for instance.
Hail, soldier. Come again.
The other scroll that's really cool, and you can start finding them here in Hunenberg,
Welcome, warrior.
is called the Scroll of Primal Chaos. It adds a ton of flat physical and flat elemental damage. So at least half of that damage you can scale with whatever character you're using. I think it reduces, by the way, don't forget this guy. He's looking for his wife because he's hungry.
Hey, have you...
And sometimes you have to talk to NPCs twice, even though they have a silver exclamation point. But anyway, that scroll reduces your attack speed, I think maybe even your total speed, but the result is a huge damage increase. So if you really want to burst a boss, and you'll see me use it at the end of part 2, it's very, very effective. So this is the part where the act becomes sort of large and sprawling and confusing. Again, I'm going to be killing more than I need to, so what you're seeing on screen is me clearing a lot. But you don't have to, and again, I don't recommend you do. What I recommend you do is to follow the path west, and you keep following it west every time it forks. It'll try to fork to the north a couple times. Just follow it west and south a little bit, and that'll take you to the mine. The mine is the very first place you want to go after you get to Hunenberg. So just remember that in your internal checklist. The guy who's looking for his wife, that's resolved later. You're going to go up this mountain and then down the mountain right after it. Right when you get down the mountain, you go east, you hug a right, and that's where you find his wife. I think he's getting cuckolded. I like to kill these sort of humanoids, mostly because they wear clothes, and because of that, they have a likelihood of dropping those clothes. I found a decent amount of blue chest pieces and bracers, for instance, just by killing trolls and the human druid type guys. It's worthwhile. And everything here seems, well, I mean, definitely at level 33, but they seem to give good experience. And you can see I'm kind of checking the map every so often to make sure that I'm not following the wrong road. You just want to keep going west. These troll crushers, by the way, I have a feeling they're pretty easy to dodge if you're playing on very fast. but if they do hit you, they can chain stun you, and if 2 of those boulders hit you back to back, it could kill you. Also worth mentioning, none of these caves, I mean, very few of these caves, are actually worth going into. I happened to get a mystic chest in this cave, so that might be worth the first few times you go through Act 5, you know, just because it's new. You might do that full exploring, but if you're watching this video, I'm going to point you into the most efficient direction, regardless of what you're seeing on screen. I'm contradicting those things by talking and saying just follow the path to the west, go to the mine. You can see another monster infrequent. That's what, the 5th monster infrequent I found, and it's been 20 minutes.
Mine is closed.
So what you're looking to do in these mines is to find a boss. I don't know what the story is. I'm not the lore guy. I think some lady lost her wedding ring or something, and you're supposed to find it. Who knows? But the end of this cave is sort of to the north and west. So you start once you enter the cave by going north. You don't want to go too far to the west, just stick to the north. And then once you've gone north for a decent ways, I mean, that's the best I can explain it really, then you start to go west. You start to veer west. So start by going north and then go sort of west and north. But I actually think these zombies are pretty good for experience. They have 0 chance of killing you. Now, maybe you're a character that does bleed damage, and by the way, undead, since Anniversary Edition, they don't resist bleed damage anymore, they absorb it. You can't get rid of damage absorption. And I think it's something ludicrously high, like 80%. Same thing with poison, by the way, it's absorb. It used to be that monster resists were high towards certain damage types, but you can reduce them with the multiple forms of reduced resistance. And if you want to know about reduced resistance, I think I'll do a separate video on offense stuff and defense stuff later on. But luckily, in this case, it's just like Grim Dawn. A lot of times between Titan Quest and Grim Dawn, there are slight differences. In terms of the resist reductions, if you're aware of that chart from Grim Dawn, it's just like that. So this guy, I feel like, can maybe kill you on higher difficulties. His projectile beam, the sort of pinkish projectile bomb thing, it's just the same spell that the Terracotta Wizard does in Act 3. It's a mixture of cold and vitality. So just make sure you're doing well on those stats. You can just swap to a cold resist ring. You probably have a cold resist ring up at all times in this act. Once you kill him, by the way, you don't want to teleport or anything like that, so there's a lot of temptation in this act to go back to quest givers. Don't do that. Just continue on. You'll see this hidden staircase. Click on the staircase, it teleports you to the front of the mine, which is convenient because we're not looking to get back to town. We're looking to continue northwards. And northwards is going to lead us to this very steep sort of incline. Once you encounter that, it's important to keep in mind that once you get to the top of the mountain, you're looking for an NPC. If you miss this NPC, oh, it's the worst thing ever. It's worse than missing all of the portals in Act 2 combined. So you really want to pay attention once you get up this mountain. You're looking for an NPC for the main quest. He's sitting next to a watchtower. He's pretty hard to miss, but I did miss him once, and it was the worst. It was bad. Bears also do bleeding damage, and they do a lot of damage in general. And so do these wasp swarm things. They're a little bit hard to see, and they're not very numerous, but they also do bleed damage, and so does the golden boar. Once you get to part 2, so you get to past Scandia, and you kill the golden boar, bleed damage becomes almost irrelevant again. So you just need a little bit to get you through this part. So again, I like killing these guys. I don't see them drop a lot of monster infrequents, but they do tend to drop the clothes. This is the guy. Don't forget him. He's on top of this very, very small mountain. Before you go down the mountain, you want to make sure you've talked to him. But anyway, these guys tend to drop their clothes. And usually by this point, I'm looking for an upgrade in my body armor. I'm on the lookout for some boots, maybe. anything's good. So you can see I did a little transition there. That's because I forgot to go to the east here, and I had to go back and do it later. But you're looking at this point for that guy's wife.
I also have some berries left.
I didn't hear you come
Yeah, I
in.
think he's getting
You
bamboozled.
probably just came for some hunting supplies, correct?
You know, I'm not even mad about that part. And by the way, you should continue on to the north from there. I transitioned back. So once you talk to her, go back to the west and continue on with the path. But I'm not even mad that there's some sort of bamboozling going on in that marriage. I mean, she was willing to walk all the way over there through all these murderous trolls, bears, bandits, and things like that. I don't even know how she got there, but apparently she just made that journey from the town. So that's probably true love. Now, if you've done Act 5 before, you might at this point be wondering, why didn't he talk to the great druid Artibus? That's because you don't need to talk to him to get his quest. You can simply just kill the Troll King, get the scythe, and then go back and talk to him. So it's a little bit of extra walking around that I just don't want to do. Again, I'm looking to make this as convenient as possible for myself, to make it as short as possible. I just want to get to the grinding points. So right here, you're going to kill a lot of wolves. This is my favorite spot for farming lupin claws, and it's a shrine farm. It's this shrine right here, right next to this little river. You'll find it by, of course, looking on the screen, but also by noting that you killed a lot of wolves on the way to get there. So I'm going to do the shrine in the reverse. It's a reverse shrine farm. And I did this multiple times. I did it until I got a couple of lupin charms, and I figured I'd get the rest with by just clearing the rest of the act, which I did. So I'd recommend doing this until you get 2 completed lupin charms for whatever difficulty you're on. But it goes from the shrine, and it winds around up this river up until you reach a troll den. I'm sorry, it's a wolf's den. And there's 3 packs of wolves in this den. There's always 3 packs, and a chest. So in terms of density of wolves, without too many horrible monsters in the middle, I think this is the most effective grind spot. Now, there's a good grind spot in Scandia. The problem with that is you have to take a bunch of these water nixies with you, and they're just about the worst thing that ever existed, so I like to avoid that farming spot nowadays. They nerfed those nixies, by the way, with a recent patch, but they're still astronomically annoying. I hate them. And as you can see, bog creepers, still not worth fighting. If you're looking for viney growth, then it's these Spriggans, the little dendroid-looking things flailing around. Those are the guys that I recommend grinding for experience, although not at this point. And you can also farm them for viney growth if you want viney growth. So by now we've gone through the mine, we've found the wedding ring, and we've found the wife bamboozler. So now we're looking for the Troll King. The Troll King, you'll know you're in the right area because there's a lot of these encampments around, and you'll see a cave to the north. You're in a place called Troll Camps, so it should be a dead giveaway. And the Troll King is in the back of the cave. Now, this area is pretty tough. Like I said, I'm doing horrible at dodging these boulders, and that could get you killed. Especially considering you don't have bleed res, and there's a lot of bleed damage here. So about the build's going pretty well so far. I've gotten my dual wielding taken care of, and I'm working up towards transmutation. After that, I'm going to beeline towards volley. I've gotten all the offense I want at this point. It would be pretty nice to get Seal Fate up to 12, because that would increase my damage by a lot, but I think volley's going to do a little bit better for me, and I'm going to get some extra stats by continuing up the hunting tree, and I'll need those stats. So this boss, he's a troll, so he regenerates. That seems to be a classic theme in role-playing games. But he does some poison damage with his projectiles, and he does an extreme amount of physical damage with his slam and his auto attacks. So for the most part, you want to treat him like a boar from Act 1, use that same sort of kiting technique. And you want to do your best to dodge these ground slams. Now, it doesn't seem like there's a cooldown for it. I've seen him use it twice successively, but normally he uses it on a sort of cadence. It's a little bit unreliable in Act 5 to treat bosses the way you did in previous acts by determining their cadence and just working it out based off their timers. And I think the difference comes down to reduced cooldowns for a lot of boss abilities and more of a dependence on just random logic. So I don't know what determines him to slam, whether it's because it's off cooldown, but again, he can spam it technically, so that's not all. There seems to be a bit more of a reliance on logic than just cadence based on cooldowns and instant use of abilities. So that'll be kind of a running theme. Just treat bosses with a little bit more care. None of them are especially hard.
So you have found...
So there we go. We found the Great Druid. We turned in the quest, and at this point, it's much, much faster. It'll save you a trip if you exit out of the game and go back into the game. So there's a little bit of annoying backtracking there to turn in that quest after you kill the Troll King. Also, I'm looking to get some slow resist for this character. One of my least favorite things in aRPGs is getting slowed, especially if I am a attack-based character. It slows your run speed, makes it harder to dodge things, and it also slows your attack speed, which is just awful. So I'll be utilizing Ajax. The piece of gear I'm going to recommend in Act 2 that provides slow res, it's a strength piece. So if I were playing a Conqueror, I would absolutely farm that. But since I'm playing an intellect-based character, really my only option is Ajax. So I'm going to get more powerful here, and I'm going to go back to Act 4 afterwards and farm it. I'll probably end up wearing 2 of them, just get about 50% slow res. So anyway, in this dark forest, you'll notice I stick to the south. I'm kind of searching around a bit for a secret area. There is a secret area here, just like there is in Act 4. And it's to the south, the southeast corner of the forest. And you can see it's right here. You'll see a cave off in the distance. That's how you know you're near it. And it's this Primrose Passage. As far as I know, up to the recording of this video, no one's found a way to get in. We don't even know if that content is available. Maybe it's something that's going to come in a future patch. I'm not sure. But I've never been in there. It's just like an FYI, you know, there it is sort of thing. So what about this place? There's Spriggans here. Is this a place you farm for Spriggans? You can, but I recommend a bit further. There's going to be another dark, murky forest, and there seems to be an even higher density of Spriggans there. Now, once you reach the Rhine, which we have, you're going to encounter these water nixies. Now, you've seen them before, but never in number. And it's really when they're in number that they become the worst thing ever. So let me tell you about these guys the way they were when Ragnarok first came out. They were extremely fast. They never leashed. They would follow you throughout the entire act if you've had a train of them. And not only did they do the ability where they duck down and become invulnerable, but outside of that, they had a huge amount of dodge. So they're pretty much impossible to kill unless you had a spell like Eruption that constantly ticked. It was very, very hard to kill them, and they do very fast projectile damage, so they're terrible. They also fixed this guy, so this guy used to be bugged. But if you talk to him a couple times, he's going to summon an ambush. And I learned the hard way that you want to run away once he summons this ambush, because some of those guys have banners, I think some of them stun, so that's a recipe for instant death. So unfortunately my only kiting path was back through these nixies, and you'll see why they're so dangerous. Not only are they hard to kill, but they're kind of unavoidable. They do a huge amount of projectile damage, and if you get a train of them going, it's a lot of projectiles. You can get yourself killed very easily in a tight corridor like in this cave. So you've dealt with the ambush. You want to make sure once you get in the cave that you walk next to that corpse. That's for the Northern Contact quest. It's easy to miss if you followed the cave to the right a little bit. You have to stand right on top of the corpse to trigger. So yeah, now those water nixies, they still spam that invulnerability duck underwater sort of spell, but they don't have the dodge they used to have before. So if you really want to, you can stand there and kill them, but you're going to have to chug potions along the way, and it's really not worth it. I believe they do drop a monster infrequent, though. It's not one I recommend farming. So we have a little bit of time here. It's a little bit of extra time. So let's talk about staves. I've been neglecting talking about staves at all, but I acknowledge that staves are a very popular thing to use. There's a lot of characters who use turn-in attack, and people just in general like building that quintessential spellcaster in these games. So in Act 5, and with Ragnarok, they took some of the more unique staff types, kind of like the Night Mistress Clutch in Act 4. They took that idea and they ran with it. So they stripped a lot of base damage off of staves and baked it into their affix area. So you'll see staves that do like no native damage, but like 600 burn damage, or you'll see staves that do physical damage, like this staff that I'm showing here. And some of these staves have special properties. I read on the Reddit that someone experimented with the physical staff and it pierced. Normally staves don't do that. So if that's true, and that's something you should test if you're a staff user, you should test every single staff you get, then this act is really going to be a huge playground for you, because you'll find those physical staves. There's a pierce staff, the Staff of the Chosen, I think is a very interesting option. It does pierce poison. So, I mean, think of the build options that didn't exist before. You can scale dexterity for damage, benefit from the defensive ability, and then use turn-in attack, something like Spirit, I don't know, Hunting or something like that. Who knows, right? That's something you never would have conceived of before, but it's unlocked with these really cool staves. I think they did an excellent job with itemization, particularly with staves, but we'll encounter more of them later. So for now, you got that keg of wine. It's impossible to miss that quest, and it's resolved right next to him, just in a cave. So, you know, go ahead and do it. And we're pretty close to Glauberg. So if you didn't talk to that guy on the outpost, you can't actually get into Glauberg. And you can probably see why that's so awful.
Greetings, traveler.
But again, lore, I don't know, just talk to everyone. Make sure you don't forget about that dude who's looking for his son. And at this point, you probably need to restock.
Welcome to the Nimitan, stranger. Here we...
So I did restock, and I decided I'd turn in some of the quests that I've kept. So I have to turn in that Cyron quest. Okay, so Phaedrus wanted the Northern Contact. So that's where you get this artifact. You can see I got satyr bones. I don't know if that's new or what. I don't recognize it. But hey, anything's better than nothing.
That ring?
Also, you turn in the ring here. She's another NPC you have to talk to twice in order to get her to do anything. She's in Hunenberg, by the way. Her name's Eliza, I think. So that was the resolution to the mine quest. And also the Celtic plaid.
Welcome to the Nimitan, stranger. Here we seek to commune with our gods and read their signs.
Yeah,
but
thanks.
You are
Oh,
looking
geez.
for more practical applications of our wisdom, are you not?
Okay, so that Celtic plaid quest has you go over all throughout the world to collect dyes. Now, I didn't show it on screen because, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. You just travel across the world and talk to vendors. It's usually random which vendors will stock them. You can check the Arcanist vendors and the Strength vendors. just get 1 die from Act 1, 2, and 3, turn it into her, and it completes the quest. So moving on then, we're past Glauberg. We have a couple things to do. There's going to be quests that we got in town. This is one of them, by the way. This guy wants you to find his mead or something. It's guarded by some bears just to the east of him, so it's resolved right next to him. There's going to be quests like this that are gotten in town, and there's going to be a couple hidden quests. So you definitely want to keep your eyes open from here until you get to the Swebi Lakes Cave. This is probably the area where it's easiest to miss things. And that's saying something, because we already passed a few areas that are easy to miss things in. So this act is just chock full of quests that are probably going to stick around in your quest log, and you're going to wonder how they went unresolved, right? Because you have to think a little bit more than you had to before, and explore a little bit more than you had to before. Alright, Tudoberg Forest. So this is the place I recommend farming Spriggans at. You can use that first shrine to start farming them. And what's great about this place in terms of XP are these Spriggans. They give a ridiculous amount of experience. But the only other monster in here for half of that forest are those bog creepers. Now you'll encounter the humans a little bit, but for the most part it's just the bog creatures, and they're slow. That means you can pull a group of Spriggans, AoE them down before the bog creatures get to you, and move on. And the Spriggans, I don't know why, but unless they fixed it by the time you got around to it, they give a huge amount of experience. Definitely give it a try. I suspect that even if they do nerf it, it will remain the best place to farm experience in this act. But like I said, I can't handle it with my computer settings, so I just don't bother. Once you reach this Existine area, don't really know how to pronounce it, Existine, I don't know. You're going to want to look for this sort of gateway looking, these 3 boulders, these standing, very tall, skinny boulders. They're a landmark that's going to point you to a hidden area. So when you see them, and you can see them by looking on the map, I'll bring up the map shortly, it's a very noticeable feature, right? They're these giant, standing, skinny stones. You have to walk in between them. That should be your trigger to look for a hidden cave. And if you walk towards the northern line of the cliff, you'll see the cave briefly appear. But it's up through this, again, sort of hidden foliage path. And it takes you up to the northwest. And what's important about this is it's where you find one of the 4 plate pieces. It's a quest you'll find in Scandia, but it's this lady who wants 4 pieces of a plate. They're hidden throughout from now till Scandia. And here's the 3rd one here in Fafnir's cave. I don't know who Fafnir is. He wasn't home anytime I checked. Maybe he's a special monster that spawns an epic or legendary. I'll have to test it. Anyway, right when you resolve that quest, you get forced into this whole new area, this Heartlands area, Wild Heartlands. I'm assuming that's what it's called. The text as I'm reading it in this post commentary is super tiny. But anyway, you'll know you're in this place because there's a bunch of these beetles that drop the rigid carapaces, and you're looking for something specific here. It's a special enemy called the Cornwhiff. I've seen him spawn in a couple different locations, and he pops out of the ground, and there's no quest marker that points to him. You'll know you found him because boss monster music will start. And there's also this nixie quest. You don't want to talk to the nixie and start doing her escort quest until you found the Cornwhiff here. So if you've already passed that nixie, you've gone too far. You'll see I encounter him pretty soon, but he looks exactly like one of these spinny scarecrow demons. There he is, the Cornwhiff. And he has this one ability where he puts a frost aura around himself. I wasn't sure if I was taking Frostburn retaliate damage when I attacked him with that aura, or if I was taking Frost degen because I was too close when he had that aura up. Either way, you're going to want to feel that ability out. It does an enormous amount of damage. I think my cold res was pretty close to capped.
Would you help me?
And once you finish that, you're free to talk to this water nixie. Now, you have to escort her to the Swebi lands, which are conveniently like 3 feet away to the northeast. And you don't want to miss this quest because it gives a skill point. It's one of 2 skill point quests in this game. So in addition to the extra skill points you get for the higher level cap and the level normalization, meaning your character will be higher level on average at any point in the game, in addition to those extra skill points, you're going to get extra skill points on every difficulty with Act 5. So you get a lot more stuff to play with. Summoners in particular should be pretty happy about that since they're pretty skill happy. So in this area, the Swebi lands, you kind of want to stick to the east. You want to do that because this is where that dude's son is. I think he went off to join this cult, whoever they are. But luckily you get to him before he drinks the Kool-Aid. Now you'll get to see firsthand here how annoying nixies are. You have to be so, I don't know, delicate with your movements around them. They just spam these projectiles, they do a lot of damage. Now the yellow version is easier to kill than the white version. You can tell I'm just tunneling her and she's not taking damage because she spams that stupid ability. I get frustrated and I leave. Luckily, they have a much shorter leash than they used to. They really acknowledged how bad those monsters were and decided to nerf them a bit.
It's my fault.
Yeah, it is your fault running away from home. So at this point, you're going to want to stick to the northwest. There's nothing else to resolve here until you get into that cave, and the cave has the 4 elemental spirit guys. So let's talk about a couple of the relics that you'll see in Act 5. The relics are the ones that drop from chests and just randomly off no particular creature, unlike charms. And you'll probably have found a couple of them by now. The ones I found are most useful are Eponas, which you'll see on screen right now. It's a boot enchant. What I like about it is it's a nice replacement for Hermes sandals if you don't have access to entrapment resist. So I'm a hunter and I do have access to entrap resist. So Eponas isn't all that useful to me. What it's really useful for is for summoners. So if you go back and look at that tooltip, you'll notice that one of the completion bonuses added health 200 on normal mode and total speed, 10% total speed to your pets as a completion bonus. Because of that, I honestly think going Valkyrie boots and having a Epona's charm on them is going to be the new sort of thing for summoners just in general. Total speed is an extremely powerful affix, mostly because not only does it make them move faster and attack faster, but movement speed is one of those things that sort of counters bad AI. So if you notice your pets, they'll try to get to a target and they have to resolve their pathing based on where their target is and what's in between them and their target. And that's frequently changing as the battlefield changes. That sort of thing kind of affects AI, and it affects your uptime, your monster's uptime on certain targets, especially melee creatures like wolves. So what total speed does is it allows you to close faster. It resolves that whole situation faster than normal, and you'll see a much better uptime. So you get to kind of triple dip. You'll get a better uptime because of that anti-bad AI sort of feature that's baked into total speed. But you'll actually get extra damage because of the total speed, and you'll get extra run speed too. So great stat for summoners. Health, great stat for summoners. So another good relic is Sigurd's Courage. Now what makes this good isn't the bleed scaling, but it's the dexterity scaling. Now, percent dex is a pretty rare thing to find, and especially now if you're scaling dexterity for damage, like for bleed or poison or pierce, then this becomes especially useful, and it should be coveted for its rarity. So here we go, that was the first sort of mini-boss. You can tell that he dropped a blue item for me. I think another one of these guys drops a blue, and so do these humanoids. So I really recommend this area. There's 4 of those mini-bosses, that means 4 Mystic Spheres. This is the area that I recommend you farm for legendaries and epic items in. Now, once you're on legendary difficulty, I think Golden Boar is the better boss. Just because Golden Boar has a high drop rate of some of the best items in the game, bar none. But on normal and epic, I think this is a better bet. You're going to get more consistent drops, I think. And you're going to get a lot of chances at some good greens and monster frequency along the way, and some experience. That's very unlike the Golden Boar farm. I mean, it's not like you're going to kill those Yeren. So that first mini-boss I killed was my least favorite, just because there's so many water nixies in that area. This guy's my second least favorite. He's probably going to be the hardest for your average character, just because he actually has abilities, and he uses them. You can see these wave features, they're very easy to dodge. He's got a shotgun cold attack. I think he also does one more spell. I'm not sure. Like a geyser? Yeah, there it is. So a lot of his stuff is easy to dodge. But because he actually has abilities, he's slightly more effective than the other mini-bosses. So you're going to want to save the Earth mini-boss for last. He's the one that's in the special area with the force field in it. It's more efficient to save him for last because right after you kill all 4 of these guys, you go through that force field. So the next guy I fight is going to be the dude of the sky, I think. These guys are all based around elementals, or elements. This guy's also annoying for me because, again, I can't kill these Spriggans. They lag my computer. So I tried to test my luck by just, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking there, but I resolved to having to kill these Spriggans, and you can see by my FPS at the bottom right, for a while I was sitting there at 24. So there doesn't seem to be a downside to killing this guy's bear. He doesn't enrage or anything like that. So you might as well. It's a much squishier target than himself. And of course, if the physics bugs out the body, you have to wait for the body to stop twitching until you can get the sphere. So don't forget your sphere there. So here in the Inner Sanctum is the last boss. We're going to have sort of the throwing weapon duel of the century here. Look at that. It's intense. Wow. He takes a long time to kill. I'm not sure why. I think he just has a lot of armor or resists or something. So there's the second blue. So this is my first run. I suspect sometimes the first time you encounter a special chest, you'll have a slightly higher chance of getting blues and legendaries. That doesn't mean repeat farms are useless. I still think you're going to have better use of those chests, and in general, this whole area, killing monsters and stuff, in terms of getting blues and legendaries than Golden Boar. So this is probably my least favorite area in Act 5. You can see I'm checking my lightning res, and you're going to want some lightning res. It's a little more important for me just because I have to run away from the wolf riders, and part of running away from them is going to put me in danger of the lightning monsters, which you'll see in a bit. But these lightning skeletons that are going to come up here, they're no joke. They do a ton of lightning damage in addition to physical damage. And the mages also are very, very bursty. So you want to stop here and kind of take a look at your resists, maybe shore up on some fizz. If you have swap rings, some of them have Dionysus, some of them have Demon's Blood. Make sure you're swapping to the ones with Dionysus. Just any little advantage you can get. You don't want to die here. But in this area, before you can progress, you need to find, I think there's 3 stolen goods. And there's a piece of that cauldron, one of the 4 pieces. We found one earlier in Exestein, or whatever that place is called. So you can see I'm frantically trying to get rid of these wolves. I don't want to tank to 12 FPS like the Spriggans. So that put me into the situation where I've pulled a lot more skeletons than I want to. Also had some of those trolls. So it's a bit dangerous. It's more dangerous for me to go through this area under these settings. In general, I would just say pull those guys like Dragonkin. You know, treat them like Dragonkin. Don't overpull them. They don't do anything special in terms of CC or anything like that, but they do a ton of damage.
Thank you so.
Your inventory is full.
What will it be?
I think it's kind of funny that your character talks in perfect American English. I mean, this is supposed to be like Greek, Egyptian, Norse, all those mythologies. So you can see that my character, I haven't been developing her. The whole point of this was to get through as quickly as possible, so I didn't go back and farm Dionysus wineskin. I don't have an enchant on my gloves, or my chest piece, or my helm, and those are all enchantable. So your effectiveness, if you're, for instance, playing a dragon hunter like I am, you should have a more powerful character than I do by now. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find a better throwing weapon that has some leech on it, particularly attack damage converted to health. Because I know that the rune word was energy drain. It's part of the left-hand tree for rune word. The attack damage converted to health there, I think it's 4%. That doesn't work. At least of the recording of this video, it doesn't work. And at this point in the game, you're really powerful enough, you do enough damage to really take advantage of that stat. It's really here in Act 4 and 5 where you can do that. Even something like 8%. Moving forward, that stat is going to do more and more, it's going to be better and better. But it's good enough now to where it's about time to start adding that to my defense scheme. You can leech life with elemental damage, by the way. You can also leech life with pierce damage. There's only a couple of weird things with elemental, like I'm pretty sure it cannot crit if you're building a melee elemental damage build with Rune Mastery. I don't think it can crit, and that's not just because it doesn't appear with the show critical damage feature, but because I actually went out of my way to test it, and I tested it pretty vigorously using a character editor. I just don't think, at least I'm not convinced, that elemental damage can crit. So that means you're going to want to ignore things like offensive ability for the most part. It's kind of weird. I don't know how OA affects melee attacks. I mean, can you still get a glancing blow if you can't crit? I'm not sure. So either OA affects melee elemental damage up to the point of critical damage, so it still has a place in terms of dictating whether you hit or not, or glance. But I doubt it. If it can't crit, I want to say it's not a part of that sort of math equation altogether. So unless more testing is done, or the guys who go in and they data mine and stuff, unless there's better information, I'm going to stick with what my testing proved to myself. And I would encourage you to test for yourself how that works, but I don't think it can crit. Like I said earlier, you can convert your shield's damage, just like you can convert your weapon's damage. That means defense skills, you can almost convert all of that damage to elemental. The only damage that doesn't get converted is the skill damage. So the actual damage you see if you hover over the tooltip for shield pummel, for instance. So there goes my frame rate. It's like 8 frames per second. Those guys are awful. And again, that's not something you should experience. Don't forget this bundle here. It's the first one you encounter. That shouldn't be your experience. That's because of the settings I'm running and the extra programs I'm using. I think if you're running this game on very fast, you might see a little bit of frame drop there. If you're running it on lower speeds than that, like normal speed, you shouldn't see much of anything. Also, about the interaction with pierce conversion and elemental conversion, I have a quote from one of the developers because I was curious about that. So what the developer said, it was based on a question. It, being transmutation, converts physical damage before pierce conversion. It stacks and it caps at 100%. So that's the quote, if you're wondering about the interaction there. What that means is, So I guess I should talk about pierce conversion. So pierce conversion is written as pierce ratio on your weapon. And that's conversion because if you had 100 damage on your weapon and a 25% pierce ratio, your total damage wouldn't be 125, it would still be 100, but 75 of that would be physical and 25 of it would be pierce, right? So it's converting a fraction of that damage. And you can tell it's doing that because if you look at the verbiage on something like blade honing, it says increased pierce ratio by X%, right? So if you have blade honing at 50% and you're using a weapon that has a 10% pierce ratio, the end result isn't 60% pierce ratio, it's 15%. And that's just because of the verbiage, it's understood. If you contrast that to how elemental conversion works, its verbiage reads, X% weapon base damage becomes elemental. So what the devs are saying is that the elemental, by its verbiage, is additive. So those will stack on top of each other. Ader will stack with transmutation additively, unlike blade honing, which stacks multiplicatively with the base pierce ratio on a weapon. So that's slightly different than how pierce is converted. And also that elemental converts before pierce. So you can conceivably, and pretty easily in fact, convert all of your weapon damage to elemental, and then pierce ratio doesn't have an effect. It doesn't harm your damage at all. You've already converted everything into elemental, which is good. It actually benefits elemental characters quite a bit. So I wouldn't necessarily take everything you know about pierce conversion, if you've played this game before, and apply it to elemental. I think that we need to fully test elemental as a separate sort of converting thing, and hopefully we can rely on the devs' feedback to illuminate for us a little bit more, but I don't know if we can actually rely on that realistically. So it's going to require testing, it's going to require data mining and all that stuff. So now you can take the boat to Scandia, the shores of Scandia. So here is another big open sprawling area. It's probably the largest open area in the whole game now. You can farm your lupin claws here. The very next area we get to is where we're going to have to turn that stuff in. So there is a grind spot for wolves here. Again, it involves training a bunch of those water nixies, and I hate those things. So I really recommend you use the spot that I showed before. It's much more effective, I think, just in terms of your yields with that claw. And it's also a lot safer and less annoying. So this is another one of those spots that could take you 20 minutes, or it could take you an hour and a half.
These brutes frown upon men who study free as magic. They say it's dishonorable. But how can power be shameful?
So you want to grab all these quests, as always. There's none that are really hidden. Sometimes these villages, they look bigger on the map than they actually appear. You know, some areas are locked off. So it's hard to determine whether you've talked to everyone. It's likely in this place you've found all the quests. The first one I like to do is this Lost Sheep quest. So you'll see I'm going north. I choose to go north. This whole place is basically a giant oval. I'm only going north until I find this sheep. So if you follow this road around to the east, she's very close. There's a cave you'll see sort of in the middle of this area. And here she is. So you just have to click on her once. She'll start to follow you. You don't have to... You can walk away from her and she'll teleport to you, so you don't have to babysit her too closely. But there are going to be these scripted wolf spawns. You're going to have to deal with 2 of them. Just don't let the sheep die. And then you talk to him. So from here on, I go south. That's the only quest I do in the north for now. And I go south straight to the barrows. There are 2 things you're looking for in the barrows. One is yet another one of those hidden cauldron pieces. and the other is a quest that you picked up in town for the Draugr King. So we got a little bit of Skyrim action going on here with these Draugr. Now they're kind of funny because if you kill the captains, they have a chance at respawning as a giant sort of bloated monster. It doesn't always happen, but it's kind of funny when it does. So here's the barrow. Barrow of the Restless King. It's one of the center barrows. It's not too far to the west. It's not too far to the east. And you can see when I kill this Draug Prince, he turned into a bloated dude. They're kind of a dorky looking thing. But anyway, this Draugr King, he's no big deal. He does some spirit-based attacks, probably vitality damage. I never bothered to test that damage type, to be honest, because it just wasn't significant. But I'm betting it's vitality. So you kill him, you get his item. You don't crash to desktop, thankfully. And then you head to the east. Now, it's not the most eastern barrow, it's the one just above it that has the next quest item. And you know you're in the right place because it'll be called Barrow, like all the other ones, once you enter it. But you'll see immediately a quest item appear on your mini-map. So that's how you know you're in the right place. If you're in the wrong barrow, it won't have that quest item. And that'll lead you to one of the cauldron pieces. There you go. So we have some free time. By the way, we're going to go north and get that scarf. You'll run into it if you just take this unexplored path to the north. So let's talk about the charms in the game. So charms do drop off expected creatures. So they don't drop randomly like relics do. The new ones that I think you should look out for are Ader. So we just got done talking about a lot of properties of elemental damage. Well, if you're an elemental damage user, then Ader is going to be really useful. If you can afford a ring slot or an amulet slot enchant, which I know is hard because there's so many good options there, then Ader is going to give you a ton of damage. This sort of flat damage that's tied to rings is very unusual, and it's very high flat damage. And unlike this tooltip that I showed you, it actually, as of this recording, also converts some of your attack damage. So if it's early days and you don't have 100% conversion because you don't have +4 skills, it might be worth equipping that on normal mode, but for the most part, I'm thinking this is going to be a charm that's used in endgame attack-based elemental int scaling builds, which for the most part will be Rune Masters. Another one good for Rune Masters is this Primal Magma, something that you can only put on bracers, so, you know, yippee Stonebinder's cuffs. But they also do a huge amount of flat damage. It's all fire this time, not elemental. But they also give this freeze resistance, which is that's not something you should discount. Act 5 has a good amount of freeze res. There's not a lot of freeze effects in this game, but when they do happen, they can be absolutely deadly. So those effects might happen in Act 4, a few times in Act 3. So having resistance to all these tertiary things is a good idea, and Primal Magma is how you shore up on your freeze res if you don't have it. So that's good not only for attack-based characters, but also hybrids. Like, I know I'll be using Primal Magma on my Earth Rune character, just because part of the time I'll be attacking in order to build up intellect through Rune Weapon. And since I'm doing that, I might as well get a little bit of extra damage out of the auto attack part, and I'll be scaling in anyway. So this Golden Boar, he's no big deal. He does some bleed damage when he does that stomp. That stomp happens in 4 parts, so if you just stand in it, it'll probably kill you. It does high bleed. You'll have to mitigate it probably on Epic and Legendary, but for now, your 20 or 30%'s enough. In fact, you don't really need it. You can just dodge this guy's stuff. Maybe if you're melee. Like I said earlier, this guy on Legendary is your best bet for farming gear.
How dare you kill my boar and desecrate this place, foreigner?
So Freya's mad, and she can actually back up her talk. These guys are no joke. They're all much more powerful than the Valor Jar you're gonna encounter later, or whatever they're called, the Inherior? I think that's how they pronounce them. They all have like stun and banner. You'll die if you just run into them. So you want to bait them back, stutter step a bit. Kill them one at a time. Hopefully you can body pull maybe 2 of them. You can also just run through them and grab the spear and then exit the game. But that's no fun. So we've done all the quests. If you're watching, we also got the cauldron. I didn't mention it when we did, but there's a cave to the west before the Golden Boar. So as you're approaching the Golden Boar, it's a little bit to the west. That has the last piece of the cauldron in it. So again, if you go north just to do the sheep quest, and then immediately go south into the barrows first, and then you go up on the opposite end, the unexplored end of the oval, you'll reach the scarf on the way, and you keep going north until you reach the Golden Boar, but before you fight the Golden Boar, continue in the little arc in the shape of the oval west until you reach that cave. That cave has the last piece of the cauldron. You should have the other 3 by now. And then go fight the boar, meet Freya, and that's it. You can do this in 20 minutes. Even on very fast. I know I'm playing with the game sped up, but I'm telling you, you could do this on very fast in 20 minutes or less. So you're probably looking through your quests right now, and you see this Cone Liquor quest and the Corn with Scythe quest. Those are unresolved. That's okay. They're going to be unresolved until we get to next video. So I'll see you there for part 2.